His laptop was working because I had some nice beats I was listening to the late Jay Dilla, from the D from Detroit. So I was like, man, damn, I just wanted some nice background music with that. But it's not working, but it's all good. Hope everyone is doing well. Hope everyone is doing wonderful. Who's viewing this live that I'm doing, you know. It's been a lot of changes for the duel. A lot of good changes, a lot of lessons, a lot of learning, a lot of forgiving, a lot of growing. It's been great. It's been really great. Excuse me. Did some hape, which is not clearing out the sinuses. So I'm going to jump right into it. I'll just share a couple of things that been going on within the healing world with me. Certain things that I've been learning along those lines. So I would like to start sharing with folk, One second, y'all. Hey. First, before I start really get anything, big up to the movie The Sinners. I'm not really a person that's into horror flicks and stuff like that. It's just not my particular cup of tea. I think there's a lot of crazy enough horrors going on in real life that I don't need to sit down and watch that. But The Sinners on one level is very wouldn't consider it to be a classic horror film, very supernatural, and what's so interesting, and the only reason why I'm bringing this up because I want to talk about the things I put in the title, but one thing what I found was interesting is the power of sound, the power of music, the power of vibration. And that was clearly shown in this film, through the genre of the blues, and, I've been seeing a couple of interviews with the director and him saying that even him seeing a cotton field for the first time, how that had a big impact on him. And some of my family, definitely from my father's side, being from North Carolina, South Carolina, definitely were picking cotton down there like many other Black folk during that time. My grandfather used to pick a lot of tobacco, and the scene in the movie, The Sinners, and I'm going to jump into, again, what I'm talking about very soon. The illest scene for me in that movie was when the merging of timelines, the merging of timelines, okay, somebody's putting some comments up there already. Music is powerful. It pushed me to finally leave my wife and pursue your lifestyle. His gay lifestyle. I had a hiding it deep inside. Okay. Yeah, everybody has sound is the cosmic glue. Sound is what brings everything together in this whole reality. Everything is frequency. I was just listening to this Sufi mystic, and they were saying one who knows the secrets of sound knows what we call reality. There's many scriptures to say that sound started this whole thing that we're in here. From from the Hindu texts, talking about the primordial sound of to other scriptures talking about the importance of sound and how that played in to this creation. So to me was the merging of timelines and seeing how simultaneously in that movie, how it was brilliantly shown on a very artistic level, was to show how there was a portal to be open to go beyond time and space within itself, go beyond the whole idea of linear time and tap into all times simultaneously. And the imagery of the creation of hip hop and crunking and all these different expressions of music within the Black culture, you know what I mean? Was brilliant. And that brings into me going into the importance of sound in psychedelics, plant medicine, fungi. I'll jump right into it. This was the first time I ever worked on animals, right? I would do something called psychic surgery, but mainly I would work with human beings, and there would be a lot of different things that would occur in these healing sessions. And I can't just call it psychic surgery because it's not just an experience where there's an extraction going on with a person, there's DNA upgrades, there's ancestral healing, there's all kinds of things that can occur in these sessions. And one big part of these sessions is the power of sound using certain instruments. That's always 90% of the time something that's involved in these healings. And what's so interesting is that each client, each person that I've been sitting down with, it's like each person has their own unique song that comes through for that person, It's amazing. Sometimes the melody might be similar, but overall, a different song for each person. And what's interesting that these songs are in different languages, and sometimes, just sometimes, there's a simultaneous translation that's going on in my brain as the songs are coming through. This happened recently when I was in Tennessee, and there was a song that was coming through for the sister, and it was a very grandmother type of song, a song that was about nurturing, about protection, and there was certain words as I'm singing it, as I'm seeing the translation come through. All right. And there's a whole science to this. I want to jump into with the animals, but it's, if you're ever wanting to, if you, a person ever have a calling to be able to say, I'm going to start doing these healings with people or different beings or what have you. The biggest thing that I've seen thus far through my journey of learning more about plant medicine, more about fungi, different things like that, sitting in different ceremonies, helping different medicine men, different women, medicine beings, to eventually sitting down, doing the work myself, is the art of listening. The art of listening, the art of listening, the art of listening. It is so, in these healing sessions, it is so vitally, it is so important because a person is dealing with an intuitive process when they're going through such healings, right? So it's like listening to say, no, this musical instrument No, this sound of pitch coming out of your voice. No, move in this direction. Sit at this angle. Don't sit too close to that person right now. Do this, do that. It's a very guided, intuitive process. And the more, I say it again, the more a person learns to let go of their logical thinking surrounding what they think that person needs, the more a person becomes a clear channel, you know? And when you become a clear channel, you learn and distinguish between various type of what we would call spiritual intelligences, cosmic intelligences, interactions with different dimensional beings. All right. And that could look like different things, you know. Sitting in Tennessee, I seen an array of different beings that would show up for different people. All right. And this could look like ancestors coming to aid, right? And as you develop your inner sight, your spirit sight, you know, some people, as they're going through their inner development, at first you might just feel them, their presence. Some people might smell them. Some people might even hear certain messages, right? Then you might come to a place where you could actually start to see and have spiritual sight. And as you start to see them, you start to distinguish to know who these helpers are. You start to understand this and recognize certain energetic signatures. So you start to say, oh, okay, this person right here, I could tell this is an ancestor. This is someone who was deceased, part of their bloodline. And usually when they show up, there's a lot of things that can happen with cleansing the blood, you know, cleansing certain trauma, certain things that might have happened maybe so many hundreds of years ago or so. All right. And you start to see the client, the person you're working with, you'll start to see a very much trickle down effect in real time on things shifting with the family. You know, there might be other beings that show up that are animals. You know, that weekend in Tennessee was one woman who was very, she had a lot of animals, earth-like beings, you know, helping her and guiding her, you know. So the whales showed up, the dolphins showed up. You know, there was this big connection with her, very much so with the birds. And also, you know, so this what showed up for her. And then I said, hey, you have to do your own research, your own study to see what that means for you, you know, if it resonates, you know. There's other times where it's deities that showed up. You know, I'm not one that was initiated into, you know, the system of the Yoruba or the Ifa, you know, or Santeria or anything like that. But sometimes sitting with a client, these are the energies that they walk with, and those beings will show up. So there was times where Shango showed up for this one client, you know, and it came through at a very important time during the healing where there was massive cleansing going on for her. Dark energy that was really still trying to hold on to her, you know. And then, you know, also Legba, which showed up, you know. He showed up twice actually, during that weekend. You know, so different things. And that's coming from my experience with just working with human beings. Now, I had this client that she wanted me to work with her dog. Her dog looked like a German Shepherd type of dog, type of breed. And big dog, the dog was going blind, very older dog, you know, and also it was, in her opinion, she felt that this dog was dying, you know. Um, it by the time I came to her property, and by the time I seen her dog, the dog was not standing. It was really barely moving around, wasn't walking around, it wasn't eating, it wasn't drinking any water or anything, you know? So it was pretty much in a bad state, you know. Um, I deal with snake venom. I deal with combo, which is frog medicine. I deal with a lot of different medicines, indigenous medicines that can help in different ways, right? Um, I first gave her dog snake venom, you know, and usually, when you're receiving this medicine, um, it is what we call gates on the skin, or burn marks on the first layer of the skin, you know, and then you drop the diluted snake venom on the skin for it to absorb and go into your bloodstream, right? Snake venom works on a cellular level. Um, it's so many different things that it could do for a person. So this was the first time I was giving it to an animal. Um, I didn't give the animal that much, you know, as much as would be a normal session for a human being. And what we both noticed with the dog is that it got more energy. She even seen that the dog had like a smile on its face, right? Which was interesting. And also, and by the way, I gave it Black Mamba, her dog. And that one is very good for any dealing with the nerve pain, muscle pain, anything of that nature. Is very good for addressing those issues. So we both noticed that the dog had more energy, and that was good, right? But also, I gave her cat Combo. Now, Combo is a medicine that you'll find throughout South America in different places. And the green jungle monkey frog, right? Um, it's considered to be the vaccination of the jungle, right? Traditionally, the native people would use it for malaria, for snake bites, for fevers, for menstrual issues with the women, all kinds of different things, right? Um, but it's a very purgative medicine. So there's going to be a lot when you're working with combo frog medicine, it's going to clean your system out. So there's a lot of purging involved with that medicine. There's a lot of going to the bathroom. It's very physical. Sometimes people really don't like sitting with that medicine so much because of how physical it can be. The nausea, the feeling of your body getting really hot and warm, the increase of your heart rate, all these different things, right? And there's a lot of water that is involved with drinking while you're with this medicine. So I only gave a little to her cat, and I put it on the nose, and I had the cat licked its nose and took in the medicine. So what I noticed observing the cat was that it went through its purgative process. So it was going to the bathroom, it was puking up, different things. And again, after that, we seen more energy from this animal, you know? So it was very interesting just to put that out there. And big up to my good friend Danny, who walked me through his experience of working with his animal friend as well. So that inspired me to start giving the medicines, sacred medicines to the animals. But when I did a psychic surgery for the dog, oh yeah, that was a whole different story right there. That was a whole different story. Again, when I'm sitting down doing these healings, I go into a very, very deep, 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 deep trance, right? And also, I know some people that might be hearing or listening to this might say to themselves, and this is, you might hear about this, especially with a lot of people that deal with organized religion. There's this place where you say, oh, you don't supposed to be dabbling in this or that, or contacting some spirits. You could get possessed, and you can be contacting something negative. Um, those things are true to an extent. When a person starts to develop their own inner power, their own spiritual connection, with Great Spirit, with their own personal guides and protectors, it's like learning something in this physical world. We know that everything out there is not, as they say, love and light. Not everything out there is coming from a place. When we look into the physical world, we know there's a diverse expression of the human experience. So we got people out there that are very kind-hearted, beautiful people, whatever, and yet still got their own flaws and different things they're working through, but still a very good-hearted person, right? And then we know there's people out there that are just sick, that are killers, that are murderers, that are rapists, different things like that, and just, don't care, from their own perspective in this reality. So that same thing applies as above, so below, as they say. In the spirit world, of course, there are negative beings, entities, different things of that nature. But when a person is doing a healing, you have to learn how to have what we call discernment. You have to be able to, it's like if somebody's walking down the street in a rough neighborhood and you're already walking down the street and see some shady type of individuals over there hanging on the corner or whatever. A person that has street smart knows different ways to see that 10 mile, right before you walk up to that situation. You're like, oh, I see that coming. I'm going to walk down that opposite street or what have you. That's the same thing that applies to the spirit realm, where you use that level of discernment, because it's like an energetic signature. You start to recognize the beings that carry a vibration of love or carry a vibration of healing with them, and you could distinguish to know that being is actually needs to be present or is allowed to be in that session with that person, if that makes sense. All right. Whereas don't get it twisted. There's moments where certain beings will try to cloak themselves. All right. And when I mean by cloaking themselves, meaning that they will try to pose as a guardian spirit or an angel or something that's there to actually help, but actually is really there to harm, and that's using your discernment as well. I'll give you an example. There was one healing towards the end, right when I was about to leave Tennessee, where this healing was very there was a couple of healings where basically there was work for the land, if that makes sense. All right. Meaning that in history, there's been atrocities that happen. There's been things that still are suffering from places, hangings, all kinds of different things. And there's been plenty of times, and I've talked about this in other videos, where sometimes a person becomes a vessel for something greater than themselves. So they might think, and you might think that that person is there just to receive the healing. But they were there also as a vessel to open up something greater for the healing of the land, for the healing of disconnected spirits that are still in a place of what we would consider to be limbo or what have you, right? That was happening plenty of times with some of the people that were involved with me going to do the healing work with the sacrament I was using was bufo that weekend, you know. Um what was interesting, y'all, was that at one point during this healing, and it was speaking about beings that cloak themselves, right, and mask themselves as benevolent spirits. Um, at one point, there was definitely some things happening for the land and the collective with this person's healing. All right. Now the dualistic principle, right? Um, some of the what we want to call the very negative forces at that point was trying to stop that, right? So, and it was a lesson within even in that because of angles where you do your healing, all that. Prior, we was doing this more in nature in the woods over there, but they had to leave, the people that invited me, so she had me do the last healing um, at her house over there, which it wasn't that far from this highway. So the angles and where you're the setting, yes, that's very important. But at the same time, sometimes you might not have the luxury to have the so-called quote unquote perfect place to do this. And you adapt. You learn how to do different things no matter where you're at. You know what I mean? So at that point in time, there was an attack. They was trying to not let it go down like that. The healing that was happening for the land at that moment, and also things that were freeing for this client's on the level of her ancestry. It was deep. So as that's going on, there was one of these spirits that wanted to try to cloak themselves. All right. It came in the guise of showing itself to me in spirit as the, like what you would call the scarab beetle or the Egyptian beetle, Kepra, right? So it tried to come through as a way to be able to say, like, I'm here to show up to aid in this healing right now. I'm one of your guides right now, right? So at that moment, it was trying to um put its placement in the middle of my back, you know. And these are things that you can feel energetically. All right. I'm very sensitive to energy. You know, it's almost, yeah, about 30 years of doing Tai Chi, Qigong, different internal arts, you know, with in regard to energy cultivation work. And at first it almost got me for a second. But then again, it's that discernment. So it's like, hold on. No, something is not adding up. And nah, homie, you don't feel like you're supposed to even be here. And at that moment, that's when I'm doing certain things to pull it out of me. And as I'm pulling it out of me, it starts to change its form. Prior to it being the Egyptian scarab looking Kepra to this disgusting looking insect thing that I'm pulling out of me at that moment. At that moment, the woman that was holding space, I'm telling her, pour water over me, pour water over me, pour water over me, right? She's pouring water over me as I'm putting the sage right directly near my throat as I'm pulling it out, right? And again, side note, I don't know why but lately all the videos that I've been making or been wanting to share with people I've been called to just share certain jewels or certain lessons and things that I've got from these healings. And there's some of this conversation, even if it's archived later, even when I leave this physical myself or whatever, archived for future shamans, for future medicine men, future medicine women, future medicine beings. There's an importance of sharing. And so there might be different listeners on here. Some people might be the listeners that never heard of any of this stuff before and might feel it's very weird, scary, strange, doesn't make sense, whatever. That's fine. I'm just sharing with people my personal experience. And I look for results. I'm not there, I have a client that's coming later today he's a medical doctor. And oh man, I had to walk him slowly through some of the things that I do. Because you have to understand, he comes from the medical establishment. They have their own language. They're dealing with the pharmaceutical industry. They have their own way about going through things. I'm a person that believes that knowledge is universal. All right. So there's something that we can all learn from each other. There's certain things that, if a person, got in a bad accident, of course, you're going to go to the hospital. You're going to get your legs sewn up or whatever, right? There's a time and a place for certain things, right? But also with me sharing with this doctor, certain things about like frequency, sacred song, even for instance, in certain cases, seeing tumors and adhesions and different things go down in real time because of the frequency or the chi or the energy that's going through my hands at that time. I mean, those things are something I can't make up. Those are things I can't doubt at all. These things happened. The sessions where somebody might have had this physical thing going on with them and they're sitting in a session and all of a sudden I see some dark smoky stuff come out at the top of their head and stuff, and next thing you know, they're better. But prior, they go to the doctor and they can't figure out what's going on. So I know that this doctor agrees or understands that there's certain things that happen, even with healing, that go beyond his scientific scope or of things. Certain things, like he says, can't really be measured or understood from that level, And, I gave him some snake venom yesterday and he felt amazing. He was dealing with a stroke and memory issues and, it was amazing, his response to it. So, it's been interesting sitting down with different people lately, from the medical world, from the scientific community. It's one brother who's deep scientist, to even people that have been coming to me in the professional sports world. A brother that's going to be coming to me soon, who was in the NFL and now is in the professional boxing world, and people looking at alternative ways to have performance enhancement. We're not talking about steroids or anything like that. We're talking about natural medicine, like for instance, that would have people that are in these fields to have faster recovery when if for injuries, um, like faster response physically to certain things. So even like this in this case of this boxer, um, a level of more precision, timing, and aggression. So I'm gonna be giving him some Bushmaster for that. Um, but back to the elements. The elements, and I'm gonna go back to snake venom too in a second, because Spirit of Snake want me to tell y'all something. The elements are important, especially when you're dealing with distractions, when you're dealing with exorcisms, when you're dealing with anything of dealing with negative energy, dark energy, right? Okay. These are things, there's not a coincidence when they from different cultures or different systems of belief or what have you, where they might use the holy water on Dracula or what have you, right? These things are important to use the elements. I use the sun a lot, when it comes down to dealing with negative energies or parasitic energies or different beings that want to hold on to an individual. Using the sun at those moments, is important. Using the water at that moment was important, So, this is not for the faint of heart for those who decide to walk a path like this. Just know, you will get attacked a lot. Not only during the sessions, but then there's the residue that comes through as well. And that's why it's important for those who do this work, future shamans, medicine men, medicine women, medicine beings, to do the cleansing even afterwards, because you have what we call the residue. Stuff that you take off of people, sometimes it could still stick on you. And a person will know because their thoughts won't be normally their own type of normal thoughts. All of a sudden there's more inner chatter going on, negative thoughts, that things that normally you wouldn't think about, or things that, you know what I mean? So you have to say, it's the residue coming on. And there's different ways that you do to strip that stuff off of you, and that's the importance of self-care for those healers out there. Self-care, to be able to say, I'm going to be taking these spiritual baths. I'm going to be making sure I'm saging myself. I'm going to make sure I'm doing my particular internal practices to raise the frequency so these things don't stick on me. All right? That's important. So yeah, things will try to come in disguise. Know about discernment. Don't be afraid. Doing this type of work, you can't have fear. We could get nervous and different things like that. But when you sit with the medicine, you're stepping into a place of self-empowerment. So that place, knowing that, stepping into your level of your higher self, your connection with spirit, and to be able to go and handle your business with a place of fearlessness. Because it's either love or fear. So that's what this is boiling down to. And it also deals with a level of frequency. That's what this is about. Also, a real side note, beyond just the cleansing, the discernment, knowing and distinguishing between different type of spirits, is to also, as I'm bring in the level of the snake real quick, and then I'll go into something else that I was going to talk about. There's an initiation into these medicines. When I was with one client, and we sat with the snake venom. That day, it was something very interesting. The snake spirit came to me. And okay. Before I do that, hold on. Before I do that, I gotta go back to the dog and the psychic surgery, because this is just giving me a whole new relationship to animals, to our four-legged friends, our winged friends, our reptile friends, all that. And I didn't have, that connection like that. I always loved nature and all that, but I'm from the city, But I'm gonna tell you, with that psychic surgery with that dog, it was profound. Like I said before, I'm used to working with human beings. So when I sat down and went into trance, I sat down with the bufo and I went into trance with this dog. First of all, there was adhesions there that went down, that I was guided to certain places on the dog. There was big lumps that were melting at the top of his head, right? These adhesions, as the energy frequency was coming through so strongly, I feel it coming down, and his head coming back, his skull coming back to a normal shape, right? There was same thing they wanted me to do under his jaw. There was inflammation near his neck. As that was going, the dog was purging, and I was purging for the dog as well. As the purging, it was more of an energetic purge, and that happens a lot too, y'all. There might not always be a physical purge or vomit. This was coming from a place of an energetic purge, and it was so foul at that moment. I had to, kind of, get the attention of the dog's owner and be like, hey, burn some sage in here. It's not good for me to smell that right now. That's some real foul energy coming out of this dog. When I got to its stomach area, I seen an image of the owner's husband, ex-husband. And then that's when I realized that this dog was holding all this negative energy for its owner. It was and it was so clear on the other side. It was like, okay, this dog is a very protective dog of its human friend. And all the abuse that was happening in this marriage, all the toxic arguments, all these things, this dog was shielding this woman to a point that was taking on the negativity, that was directed to the wife. And I seen a clear image. And it was funny, the night before, I was just asking the women, oh, I would love to see a picture of your family, your kids and all that. And she was showing me different pictures, and she showed me a picture of her ex-husband. And that's the only way I could make the reference from the night before, when I seen an image of the ex-husband come up in the dog's stomach. So that was deep. And at that moment, after that, it was like I seen a life review of the dog. So I was able to see the dog from a puppy and it going through its whole teenage years or early adult dog years to its time now. And as that happened, it was like this big energy went through the dog. The dog stood up at that moment. It was very strange because the only reference I got in the spirit world was the dog looked like half dog, half human, half dog. Like the bottom part of its body was human and it had like a dog face. And I swear to God, that's when the dog stood up, right? Now, this dog hasn't been energetic and all that because it was very sick. I don't really understand what the imagery of that was or why they wanted me to see that. But the only thing I might make a reference to that possibly it might be coming back, maybe possibly reincarnated as a human. Who knows? But it was very interesting. And at that point, it was like I was able to see the oversoul of the canine family. That was dope. That was dope. And it's like the collective, if we have like, if we want to consider like the oversoul of the human experience, you know, if we want to bring that into some reference like that. But that's what I was witnessing with the collective consciousness of the canine family. That was amazing, right? So that was an honor. It was an honor. It was an honor. It was an honor to be able to sit with her dog and do that healing, which got me into a place of wanting to work with more animals now, and possibly even work. I seen in my mind's eye, even wanting to attract the possibility to work with horses, and sitting down with being able to sit down with various animals and with the usage of the sacred medicines, and see how that interacts. You know what I mean? How that happened, how that will unfold. Um, and it feels like ever since that experience with that dog and that healing, it feels like I've been more aware and close to, again, our animal friends, are these creatures, these reptiles more. Like even sitting so many years of serving snake venom or even frog, it felt like these past 2 weeks I got initiated into a deeper connection with the snake. It happened when I was working with that lady at one point, and it came through very, very clear that evening that these reptiles, and not just, I'm not going to speak for other creatures and animals, but at least when the reptile came to me, that snake came to me that night, it said that it wanted to be treated with respect, with honor, with integrity. It did not want to be used and felt like it's some commodity. And it made itself very, very clear to me. And so those who are interested in working with snake venom, or work with snake venom already, be careful of how you treat these creatures. Make sure they're living in ideal spaces, not just to be in some daggone plastic tub, or put in the drawer and then just taken out when it's needed to take its venom. That's not right, and these creatures do not like that. There's a difference in the medicine and how it's received when a person prepares it with love, when a person collects the medicine from these creatures with love and respect. There's a difference compared to someone who is just haphazardly just going around because they're driven by a level of greed. When people are in the jungle collecting the frog medicine, the combo, they make sure they put a white dye around its leg, around its ankle. After they collect the medicine, to let other medicine men know, don't take more of that medicine off of this frog. It needs to build up its immunity, its poison again, so it could have its own protection in the wild. There's the level of sincerity in living in harmony with the creatures around us. And they have a lot of gifts to give us. Best believe that. But why share their gifts with some beings or people that don't respect them? That I felt like I had to share that because that was the message that came through, and it came through very loud and clear. And there's mysteries to this medicine that people have not even discovered yet. And it's not going to show you, the medicine is and is not going to give you these gifts or these secrets if your heart is coming from a very disrespectful place. You know, I gave my lady some snake venom the other day because she was going through something physically. Next day, she felt better. Not only did she feel better, but her psychic abilities start to come on stronger. Her sense of smell has been off the hook, you know? So it's a beautiful medicine because this medicine, especially the snake venom, works on a cellular level. Yes, there's certain snake venoms that deal with terminal illnesses, um, mental health, which is a big one, which is on the top tier. You know, we have a population of people that are dealing with depression, which we can understand why. We're living in this crazy ass world that deal with anxiety, you know, and all these things. People that have anger issues, you know, all these things. And, you know, these things are usually stemming from a place of trauma. You know, even myself on this journey, I mean, there were a lot of things in these past years I wasn't aware of about myself, you know, until I started to have more experiences in life, going deeper within my own healing, you know. So sometimes we don't even know that we're sick. And the beautiful thing also for me, I have a beautiful partner, beautiful woman in my life. And I have not always been the best at relationships, you know. I felt like I was always a good man, but I felt like I did not have the emotional intelligence, the maturity, and some aspects of myself that needed to step up to be a better man. And especially when we're in committed relationships, it's a beautiful thing because we become mirrors for each other. And if somebody really loves you, they're not just gonna let you go about in your life unconscious about certain ways about yourself. People care about you, they're gonna point things out. And they say, hey, you know, you might want to look at this or improve this within yourself, you know? So the relationship with the medicine is the same thing. Just like you were going out with someone or anything, or building up a relationship with your girlfriend, boyfriend, or what have you. You know, the same thing that applies to the sacred medicines. As I'm having a more profound respect for nature and its creatures and their beings, the more I am getting more connected with these medicines where they're speaking to me very directly, you know? And there's a whole new level of connection with the snake venom with me, you know, which is profound. It came to me even last night after the doctor and his friend left. And I said, let me go in with the medicine for a second, with the bufo for a second, just to, you know, just to see a little more about this man that came to visit me. And the medicine, the snake came through loud and clear and told me certain things about this man on how to approach his session today, you know? And it felt like I was on the snake venom at that moment, and I didn't even take it. yesterday. So it was like I was connected to those two people yesterday. And I felt like I was going through the snake venom experience, you know? Very, very interesting. So if you are going to be a snake venom holder, please, please, by all means, build a relationship. Make sure you have a beautiful place for that snake to live. You know, make sure it has some things that make it comfortable, not just thrown in some drawer. You know. Also, in regard to holding space and having discernment and being a channel for different intelligence to come through, we're talking about what I find so interesting is that we have access to different dimensions, you know? And the beautiful thing about this journey is that when you start to have a direct experience with even quote unquote loved ones who have passed away and stuff, it's a freedom there. It's a freedom. It's a freedom because now you got access. Your loved one who passed away that you might have missed or you cared for so much, now you got still access. You could still see them ever so often, you know, or get messages from them, you know. In the case of the last client I worked with when I was in Tennessee, sometimes you have spirit guides that are quote unquote famous people in the media, you know? And I had my fair share of different celebrities, so-called celebrities or artists who have passed away and has come through, you know? And those moments are amazing. You know, I never forgot when Tupac came through one time for an ayahuasca ceremony. And he came through because at that moment in time, the shaman that was holding space, he had a psychic attack on him. It's this guy from Peru. And you might hear about this even in shamanic literature, you know, anthropologists that have studied these different medicine men and women around the world. And you might hear about things like, you know, psychic daggers or psychic, you know, someone threw a dart, you know, these negative darts, you know. So, you know, the remote viewers and all those things are real, you know. And you have a lot of people that work for different organizations. And their job is to try to keep tabs on you. That is real too. So the psychic daggers were thrown at this particular shaman in the middle of his ayahuasca journey, ceremony. And dude fell over. Dude, like, listen, y'all, in the middle of his sacred songs with the guitar and all of it. And it was like I was the only person that was able to see what was going on at that moment. It was crazy. And as the negative darts came through the window and hit him, and I seen him slump over, to this day, I still won't forget this. That's when I seen in my mind's eye, brother Tupac Shakur come in spirit form with two guns on his side. Engraved on the guns were God. Two golden guns. And at that point, it looked like it was had to be like 100 to about 150 different, very muscular looking black men that surrounded the area where we were having the ceremony, and thus being a form of protection. At that moment, that's when this spirit, this warrior spirit came over me. And it was like I did a brief dance and I punched the ground. And as I punched the ground, it was where like somebody throw a pebble in the water, you see the ripple effect. It was like a ripple effect of powerful energy that went through the space where we was at. And it hit the shaman. And next thing you know, he gets up and he's like, he shakes it off and starts playing the guitar again. Towards the end of the healing of the ceremony, the shaman was trying to say to us, oh, I feel the ayahuasca was bad. And we were all saying, no, not at all, bro. I was like, I was saying to him, I was like, everybody had their experience here. But he was referencing when he fell over, when he got attacked. I said, no, there was nothing wrong with the ayah. I said, you were attacked. And guess who came to your aid? Now, he was, he spoke Spanish, whatever, and he had his interpreter there, right? I said, Tupac Shakur. You should have seen the look on his shaman's face. He's this look of confusion because, he's not from this part of the world and, doesn't really know like rap music like that, So he's like scratching his head like, who? And the translator had to say like, yeah, musician, rapper, Tupac Shakur, And I could tell it was still confusing for the shaman. I don't even believe he believed what happened. But later on, not that long afterwards, the brother got locked up. And I tried to give him a warning, Things get real, But in regard to different, even artists and celebrities, that last healing, Alice Coltrane came through. Now, some people might say, who's Alice Coltrane? I know we got different listeners here, different age groups and stuff like that, But Alice Coltrane was a beautiful master harpist, a great, 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 great jazz musician. All right. She was the wife to the famous jazz musician John Coltrane, And if y'all never heard these people's music, look them up. Look them up. Always expand your horizon, expand your diversity of sound, with music, right? Expand it, John Coltrane I got introduced to all this music because my father used to play jazz music back in the day, right? My dad used to play the horn, the saxophone, the piano, all that. And he actually got a chance to meet a couple of very famous jazz musicians during his time, in his day. He met Miles Davis. My father rocked out with Pharoah Sanders once, and my father even met Alice Coltrane physically when she was alive as well. My father hung out with Gil Scott-Heron before, My dad has a lot of very interesting experiences that he went through in life. Very interesting man. It's not a coincidence why I picked him as a parent, But what's so interesting is John Coltrane was one of those jazz musicians enlightenment. He really believed that music could be a tool for spiritual awakening. All right. And there was a point where John Coltrane in his life was addicted to drugs. You know, he was dealing with heroin, and like the jazz scene. There was times in the jazz scene where that was just part of the culture, where you had certain drugs of choice that came along with the music, right? So John Coltrane, it was said that one time he locked himself up in this room, and he told his wife at the time that do not by any means open this door until I deal with this addiction, you know? And he went cold turkey. And from that experience of kicking that addiction, he came up with the album A Love Supreme, which is one of my favorite albums by John Coltrane. And it was an album dedicated to God, you know? And John Coltrane would travel around the world and study with different musicians from Africa to Asia to India, and learning different cultures on how they approach sacred sound. All right. Um, Even when he went to Japan, he first thing he did when he got off the plane was he broke out his flute and did a song dedicated to apology from the U.S. and what we did to Japan at that time. You know, so the people loved him. You know, and his wife Alice was just as deep. You know, I seen them as this very divine couple. I seen them like from the comedic perspective of Osiris or Asar and Aset or Isis, or Aset. They were a very mystical couple. And Alice was getting deep into within her music with the Indian mysticism of Hinduism and stuff. And Yogi Satyananda, that was one of her main gurus. And she does have a book talking about her spiritual experiences. Deep, deep woman. All right. Well, long story short, I'm in this healing. I'm doing this healing with this sister. And at one point in the healing, I look up and I see Alice Coltrane. I see her spirit. And she's just standing there observing, watching us, you know? And I just make a mental note. I'm like, interesting. Alice, I see Alice Coltrane, And she's very quiet, Sometimes when different spirits visit you or are in a particular place where you're doing ceremony or what have you, sometimes you'll get telepathic messages, And telepathy is the main language. It's the universal language. It's the cosmic language. You could really see how evolved the species is by how they communicate. At one point in time, human beings were more telepathic, at one point in time, but the majority of beings out there in the multiverse come from a place of telepathy. So I wasn't getting any messages from Alice Coltrane at that moment. She was just there holding space, observing. All right. And when beings show up, sometimes again I could distinguish they're showing up to help, right? And sometimes there might be my own spirit guides or ancestors or protectors or teachers that might come forward to help with the session. And then there's sometimes witnessing the clients, different teachers, protectors, ancestors, spirit guides, so on and so forth that'll show up. I knew this Alice Coltrane wasn't my spirit guide per se. And at one point, I didn't know if she was the spirit guide for the client that I was working with. But I did understood a couple of seconds later who the spirit guide was, who Alice was connected to. And it was the woman that invited me out to Tennessee. And she was holding space with me, being able to give me water if needed, burn sage in the middle of the session if needed, or what have you, right? So when I look up and I see Alice Coltrane observing us, I go back into, my singing and stuff, the channel that's coming through. And then I look up again, and then I look at the lady that brought me up to Tennessee, the space holder. I see that Alice Coltrane's spirit goes into her body at that moment, right? So I'm looking at the woman, and she doesn't look like herself anymore. She looks like Alice Coltrane. So I was like, this is interesting, right? So I just take a mental note of it and continue doing the work. Next thing I know, I look up again. The sister that invited me to the space looks like herself again, right? I don't see Alice anymore, her spirit. And next thing I know, when I set up for a healing, usually I have different musical instruments laid on the floor, right? Like, let me turn the camera around, like to give you like an example, right? Like there's a couple of musical instruments there, different stuff, right? So I had different musical instruments that were laid on the floor, on the ground, next to the lady I was working with. And the sister that was holding space, that Alice Coltrane jumped into her body momentarily, I had a mini harp there that was placed on the ground. And for whatever reason, she touched it, right? And the sister looks up at me like with this look in her eyes, like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make that noise." Look on her face like, "I'm sorry, I didn't want to disturb you," and I just smiled back at her like, "Sister, if you only knew, that is so on point what you just did, because it was like a confirmation. It was a confirmation to let us know that Alice Coltrane was in the house at that moment, because again, she played the harp and all that. So it was so funny. And again, at the end of the healing, of course, I shared with them, the client and the sister that was holding space, that Alice came through. And she's like, yeah, the sister that was holding space was like, yeah, something told me to kind of move the harp, I don't know why I felt like that, even though it wasn't in my way. It just felt compelled like to move it just to the side a little. And I was like, yeah, what's the likeliness of that, of you doing that in the timing when Alice Coltrane comes through? So again, there's different guides, there's different spirits. There's even people that in history that might have been musicians or different teachers when they were alive, or revolutionaries, or historians, movers and shakers in the world, what I mean? And as they pass away, they still sometimes feel very connected to this earth and still want to help people that are still alive on this earth. So that is definitely a reality as well, my friends. And just to let y'all know, I felt compelled to share that. I'm going to do a little hape for a second. Hape or rape is sacred tobacco medicine, mapacho, that you'll find in the jungles. And it's different than the tobacco we have here in the US. It's very good for getting out the clearing the sinuses, getting all the mucus, the phlegm out. Very grounding. Can be very energizing too. Um, and I'm gonna do that for a quick second, and then I'm gonna share with you something interesting along the lines of the Tibetan inner heat practice. And I'm gonna read some comments for a second. So give me 1 second, y'all. And thank y'all for listening. And I hope I'm not long-winded. I hope this message is coming out to y'all clear. I hope that whoever's listening, that maybe it's going to be something that resonates with them to help them out in their journey. And thank you for taking the time to listen with me. I appreciate it. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Okay, I'm gonna read some of these comments and then I'm gonna get into it. No, I'm gonna just let me just continue with this thing with the inner heat because I'm going to finish off with that and do some comments. All right. Excuse me. Okay. When we think of the inner heat practice, you might have some people might have heard of Wim Hof. This is very different than what this guy does, climbing Mount Everest and running around just in his boxers or what have you. This is a practice that has been passed down through the Tibetan Buddhist lineages that deals with heating up the body. You would see these men and women do these practice and they'll be covered in snow. There's one video they show this guy going high in the mountains with these Tibetan monks, and these guys are putting snow over their body, and they stood over there overnight. And they just woke up like a little polar bear, like, hey, that was nothing. Um, some of the practice is that they would dip a big towel in soaking cold water and sit on frozen lakes and dry the towel. These were different things they would do. Connected to the six yogas of Naropa within that whole lineage. And there's a lot of things that involves the practice. I've been called to learn this practice. I got into Tibetan Buddhism in the early 2000s. And the reason why I was drawn to it was like early 2003, 2004. And I sat down and learned from a lot of different interesting lamas, rinpoches, met a lot of amazing people during that time in my life. And I learned about the famous Milarepa, very interesting man to study. He lived about 700, 800 years ago. And this man was very interesting. He had the ability to fly, y'all. This was recorded by many people who would see him flying through the air. Oh, that's Milarepa again. And within the Tibetan system, you would hear a lot about the siddhis, Siddhi. And this is translated as a term talking about those who have what we call quote unquote supernatural powers. So, yes, the flying. There's a stage that you do before you be able to fly, and that's the fast runner technique. And I have a very old teacher of mine who I haven't seen in years. I probably haven't seen him almost in 15, 20 years. His name is Garchen Rinpoche. And Garchen Rinpoche, I remember I was talking to him, and for some reason, this elder wanted to share with me about the fast runner technique. I don't know why he wanted to share that with me. But he kept on doing this with his fingers, like pretending like these were legs. And he's like, yeah, he had this translator. He didn't speak that much English, but he had this translator that was saying, yes, fast running technique, where they would put these particular mantras, they would paint them on the bottom of their feet, and they would do this particular activation where they were like, you remember in like the Jedi and in Star Wars where you would see them run super fast? Yeah, that's what these men and women would do, and they would be able to jump super high for so many feet from one place to another. There's a lot that we don't know. There's a lot that, because we've been so indoctrinated, that culturally we see reality just from one standpoint. That we think that we just have these five senses and that's it, But when we start to develop the mind, the heart, our spirit, build up our energy, there's a lot of things that we can discover about ourselves. The so-called powers that be do not want you, me, your average person knowing these things. That's why there's always been secret societies, different things of that nature, for a reason. There's a book called Faces in the Smoke. I forgot the name of the author, but it was a guy who was around studying different healers around the world. And one of the chapters in the book was a chapter on the healers in Haiti. And that chapter, they talk about the secret society of flying men. So this stuff is interesting, and it's just like the comic books. That's why the late Baba Kalindi, I thank him so much. He was a big comic book reader. These are things that we put in popular media and in entertainment, but are coming from a real place, and the whole super villains, superheroes is real. When you have a person that, my father used to tell me all the time, yeah, son, you could walk through walls, you could levitate, you could do all those things, but you have to master yourself first. There's a lot of people that might get cities, but they haven't developed their level of wisdom and compassion. In Buddhism, they would call that bodhicitta in Tibetan Buddhism, developing the heart, the all-pervading heart, So therefore, a person that develops certain supernatural abilities but has not dealt with their quote-unquote shadow work can become dangerous. If they haven't dealt with their pride, their arrogance, their lustfulness, all these things, it can be problematic. And that's where the quote-unquote supervillain comes in, I'll never forget. I never forgot that. I never forgot where there was this, Yogananda, of Kriya Yoga, the autobiography of the yogi, a great book. Many people read that book when it first came to America and in the 1930s, and coming from a place where people weren't aware of yoga or Eastern mysticism. There's a chapter in that book where, and this is a real life person that was spoken about in this book, where he developed a city or a supernatural ability where he had the ability to touch a physical object, make it disappear and reappear on himself. So do you know what this guy started doing with this particular supernatural ability? They talk about in that book. He started robbing the jewelry stores in Bombay, in India. So this guy would literally go into a jewelry store, pretend like he's going to purchase something, right? He would go in there, he would try on this ring, and so, I don't really like this. But let me try this necklace. Oh, I don't really like that either. He would have the energetic imprint of the jewelry, of the gold. And after he touched all the objects, all the jewelry that he wanted, he would walk out the store. In a minute or two, the jewelry would literally just disappear and come on his person. The Indian police was in an uproar. It was an uproar because they was like, hey, we have a master thief at hand, and there's no way, we don't know how all this jewelry is becoming missing. It's just, and word got out eventually to the main guru. Some of his students started to tell on this guy and say, hey, Guru so-and-so, you got this one student of yours who's robbing the town. And the guru at first didn't believe these other students, because this was one of his more advanced students. And he's like, no, such and such would never do that. So he put his student to the test. The guru disguised himself, put on this fake wig and all this thing, and he looked like a beggar. He disguised himself as a beggar in the street. And he seen his student. And he came up to him and said, hey, I heard that you're this great healer, and I would love to get some healing from you. And and the guy just walked past him, like, he's looking at him and looks at him like, this poor beggar, I'm not wasting my time on him, And the teacher called out to him, but wait, I do have this thing, this piece of gold or what have you that was passed down through my family, And that got the attention real quick of his student. So he says, hold on, wait a minute, I do have some time for you. And of course, he did his little thing where he touched his teacher, didn't know it was his teacher at the time, the gold thing that was in his hand. And then he said, oh, I don't have any more time, I have to go, and walked off. And of course, the gold thing that was in the teacher's hand disappeared and reappeared in his student's hand. And at that point, his teacher yelled out to him and said, you scoundrel, I did not want to believe you was doing this, but I caught you red-handed, And of course, the student was very embarrassed to know that his teacher caught him using these supernatural powers for his own selfish gain. So the teacher stripped them away of that power. And the only reason why I'm sharing that particular event with you from that story is to let people know that it's not just about the power. My father used to tell me all the time that sometimes when you start to get these powers, observe them, even develop them, but don't get attached to them. Because when you start to really get attached to them, that's when sometimes the ego will get in the way. Your pride will get in the way and start to think that you're better than others or you're more special than others, and that's where a lot of people start to put these people on the pedestal and come to a place of even worship, like, oh, may bow down to this guy or whatever. And these teachers are all authentic teachers are telling you all the same thing, that don't bow down to me. Don't look up to me. Yeah, I can inspire you, but don't look up to me that like I'm better than you, because we all have the seed of enlightenment within us. We all have the cosmic blueprint in us, dormant, waiting to come to the surface. You know? So yeah, the powers will come. That's a given. And but don't get too caught up in them. I remember one of my teachers from the Kriya Yoga tradition said the greatest superpower a city you could have is the stillness of mind. Being able to have a level of what is called equanimity, or this balance or harmony within ourselves. So you won't be swayed to go emotionally from this place or that place. Imagine you having somebody having some superpowers and somebody step on their sneakers on the bus, and next thing they know, they want to use their magical abilities to take them off this earth. I know it's corny, but we all heard Peter Parker's uncle say, with great power comes great responsibility. And it's very, very true. I'm big into the anime. And, one of the early animes that really blew my mind was an old school anime called Akira. Akira, Akira. And there's many themes to that movie. But one of the things that I find very interesting is the main character who starts to come into his full power. The power became out of control because, again, he did not do his homework. He did not do his shadow work. He did not look at the parts, the disconnected, dismembered parts of himself. Prior to him getting these powers, he was teased a lot by his peers. He felt like he was not accepted. So all that animosity, all that sadness, all that rage came to the surface when he started to come into power, which thus destroyed him. You see this common theme over and over with even in popular media. These are the cosmic mythos that are trying to be related to us, to jog our memory to who we really are. All right. So within the Tummo, recently it was that I was called back to these lessons within the Vajrayana Mahayana path of Tibetan Buddhism. And I felt my next stage of learning had to evolve around Tummo, the Tummo practice. And I remember I reached out to this elder. His name is Lama Mike Crawley. Very interesting man. I got to speak to him a couple of times. And he wrote 2 books talking about the secrets of psychedelics within Buddhism. And how within this spiritual system, like many other spiritual systems and schools of thought, that psychedelics are definitely involved. Usually, again, in the inner circles, but he has a great 2 books talking about that subject. The ambrosia, the amanita, so it's, so I reached out to him and asked him if he knew any people that was teaching Tummo. He said that he would get back to me, but he didn't get back to me yet about that. I end up meeting this client and find out that she has a teacher that teaches Tummo, and that she was willing to introduce me to this elder, and also willing to show me the basics of some of the movements and breathing techniques. Long story short, and there's so much I can disclose about this session out of the privacy of this individual. But one thing I will say is that I was working with the frog medicine with her, with combo, which I talked about earlier in this video, which they consider it to be the vaccination of the jungle. A very purgative medicine, you know, and when you're done, you feel like every cell in your body was cleansed. It felt like someone coming with these cleaning supplies with the sponge, the brush, and the broom, and it's just going through your body and cleaning all your organs, cleaning your blood, all these things. You feel very good, fantastic afterwards, especially the next day. It's very good for also addictions. You know, a lot of times, a lot of people come back from those combo sessions and say, "Ooh, I don't really have to, you know, I cut down on my smoking, or I don't really drink as much coffee anymore," all these things, right? And also it deals with a level of purging the negativity out of a person, which in the jungle they call panema, or dark energy. So having her and her friends sit with the combo, and at first it's like the regular thing that's happening where you see the person's body start to get heat up and it's starting to feel a little nausea and all that. She was reporting back to me after her session was over that she was feeling like the combo was working on things with her teeth, and you know, she, you know, definitely there was something going on with her ears, and her body started to get very hot. But I never seen anyone, as long as I've been working with combo, to be able to start doing some esoteric yoga practices while on the combo. So she started doing some of the movements within the Tummo practice. And I've seen certain videos of certain monks demonstrating some of the movements, and I recognized that she was doing that. Now, at that point, the logical side of myself was like, well, she's supposed to still be drinking that water to purge anything that needs to come out. But my intuition was like, nope, just let her do what she's doing. And at that point, I do a little microdose of the bufo, because I find that working with the combo, when you microdose with another sacrament, you're able to see in real time and have more insight into what the person is purging. You know, we have our own way of examining the throw up as well, like a tea reading, where the coloration shows what's going on inside the body, certain organs that are being cleansed, you know, so on and so forth. But the sacrament allows you to go in a little deeper to know in real time what that person might be purging out. And it could come in as images within your inner eye, you know, maybe seeing something that happened to them when they was a little kid or whatever, and all this in real time, allowing that trauma, that, you know, that coming out in the bucket, you know. So as she's doing this Tummo practice, I start seeing all this very, 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 very dark negative energy being transmuted at that time. First of all, her guy that showed up at that time was Padmasambhava, the great yogi that visited Tibet, that was from India, who brought Buddhism to Tibet. He was very well known. They called him the Lotus Born. He was very well known to defeat demons and make them Dharma protectors. All right. He showed up before it started really getting intense. And then there was moments where all this Nazi shit started coming up. Even seeing Hitler at that moment. And just like there was healings for the land, there's healing for collective memory and history. It felt like the only way I could describe it, her lineage in real time, I was seeing had to be cleansed. And then I later find out that one of her relatives was one of the right hand man for Hitler. You know, he was one of the key people that dealt with the propaganda, you know, pushing that out. A lot that was going on with her family bloodline. And that, at that moment, with her doing the transmutation with the Tummo and also other forces such as Padmasambhava and other high masters that were coming through, we both started purging that collective memory out, not only in our bloodline, but also things that were happening for the collective. It started to thunder right after we did that, which is another key sign from her tradition of the thunderbolt Vajra, you know, the lightning bolt. There's a tool that you'll see a lot of these Tibetan monks and nuns use. The bell, which represents the female, and the dorje, you know, which represents the Vajra thunderbolt, the masculine principle. And it started to become, have a very thunder, big rainstorm after we was done, which I found was very interesting. And saying that was a key sign of Padmasambhava. It was a lot. And there was moments again where the water had to pour the water over her, had to pour the water over me during the middle of that session of really transmuting that negative energy in our bloodline. And the ancestral work of clearing the bloodline is very important, you know. And I'll leave with that subject and go into the go into the comments. You know, there was a time in North Carolina when I was working with an elder. And I had a good friend who was holding space with me as well and doing the healing with me, who I was teaching her more about Shunga at the time. Great healer, this sister. And at one point, working with this elder, I seen this white man, his spirit of this white man come walk into the room. Stumpy, kind of fat white guy, balding hair. And let me back up. Before he came into the room, in my mind's eye, I was seeing all these cotton fields. I was seeing these slave cabins, right? So I just take a mental note and say to myself, why am I seeing this right now, right? And next thing I know, this white guy comes into the room, you know? He starts to talk to me telepathically. And he's asking for forgiveness. I learned that he's a relative of this elder Black woman who's receiving the healing. And he enslaved a lot of her Black family. And also raped a lot of the women in her family. Thus, having biracial children thus introducing his European bloodline into her family. He was asking for forgiveness. And there was things that had to be done on the other side to clear the bloodline of her family for both sides. There was another one that was in her family. After this guy, the heavyset white guy leaves, after all that healing work was being done, there was another guy that came through. And this guy was much taller. He had red beard, red short beard, and red hair. His energy came off very, very nasty. He wasn't looking for forgiveness, and he was very problematic, even from being a deceased ancestor from the other side, still causing havoc. It made it very clear that this particular being had to be decapitated and brought back to the essence. I've never did anything like that on the other side before. And it was at first, it was a moment of hesitation, because naturally I'm not a violent type of person. But a big energetic sword came out of my hand and off with his head. Now, that sounds interesting, because you would think when someone dies that someone can die again, even that their spirit could die. But I found that was interesting. And I did a prayer for this particular being. I said, may you really go back to the essence and be reborn a better being. That's why I like the anime Demon Slayer. I really associate a lot with the main character. And I feel it's a very interesting anime, because he doesn't come across of just taking adversaries out with hatred. When he has to do it, he does it. But usually before he does it, he sees how that person or being became a demon. And again, the cartoon every time shows a level of trauma where that particular character could not let go of what was plaguing them. And thus they was consumed by that trauma until it eventually became something else. But the main character within that anime, before he takes that demon out, he always sees their past. And because of that, he's more able to relate to them more in an authentic way. So it's even when he takes them out, it's like a level of still compassion there. It's like that scene when Bruce Lee was fighting with Chuck Norris. And you seen at the end when he took Chuck Norris out, he got his gi, he got his martial art jacket, and he put it over him. And still with that level of respect from one warrior to the next. Because we know that everything is still connected. But I'm going to read a couple of comments, and then I have to go, because I have to get ready for this client that's coming over. Diddy's music really changed me, and it could change you too. Just foul. Okay, to each his own. That's all I have to say on that one. Someone says, producer third son, peace, Dooley. Peace to you. Another person says, peace and love, brother. A person says, felt it before too, almost like an hack. Alpha HQ. I believe that person was talking about a comment in regard to when I was talking about cloakers, in regard to having discernment between when a spirit shows up, you know, because a lot of people warn against, especially in organized religion, with dealing with the spirit world. They make any association with the spirit world with making deals with the devil or dealing with something negative, right? Um, Now, there's a lot of fear. There's two ways of looking at that. One, when we deal with the priest class, and we see that throughout history, where you have a group of people or an individual who's labeled as the one who's an incarnation or a connection to the divine. And no one can go through that person but through them or that individual, right? Um, from that perspective, it kind of disempowers the population, and disempowers your everyday individual. From that perspective, now there's codependency in saying that I can only go through this person to be able to have a connection to the divine. All right. There's that, right? There's that severing of you from many dimensional realities, right? And there's the other wisdom behind it, because that comes with, again, a place of dealing with politics and power. So again, if you have a people that are connected, then therefore we don't need to go pay tithes or go through this particular church or mosque or a synagogue or anything. You know, we understand that we have a vessel or an inner church within us that could be able to have that direct connection. Now, that's the common theme of mysticism, which is expressed in various religions outside of the Orthodox. So, you know, in Islam, we talk about Sufism. And Christianity, we have, you know, references to the Essenes, supposedly the spiritual community of Yahshua or Isa or Jesus. So therefore, there's references. You know, there's references in these books if we are able to decipher them and see where you fit in that stage in your life of how it resonates with you. But there's chapters of saying the kingdom of God is within, you know. So there's common themes over and over telling a person to look within, you know. But again, dealing with politics, dealing with systems of power, we can understand how they want to sever people from that. Then it comes to the place of what we call, again, maturity, spiritual maturity. So again, if a person has not dealt with building up their own personal power and protection, yes, I wouldn't advise a person to go into these realms of consciousness without readily preparing oneself and exercising one's discernment, right? So from that place, again, if they don't know, if they through practice with anything, you get better. So if you haven't sat down with the medicine, if you haven't explored this relationship, then you aren't familiar with the terrain. You're not familiar with the territory of the spirit world. So therefore, coming from that place, yeah, someone can come in a guise or a cloak to think that they're there for your best interest, but really are there to bring chaos into your life, you know? And so you can understand also the wisdom that is applied to full warnings of like, hey, don't deal with the spirit world so much, or anything like that. and it's wisdom there for those who are the novice, those who are the beginners of the path that need to do the groundwork, that need to do the foundational work first, which is first dealing with your trauma. And there's always going to be something that's going to pop up in life. There's always going to be something else to learn about yourself. But then there's levels where you do go through various things of significant changes or shifts within your consciousness, you know? And those things are to be taken note of. Okay, now let me see what else is said here. Thank you for your presence and wisdom shares. Cordyceps, yeah, those are very good for the brain. And microdosing psilocybin, okay. Please do a stream about taking down reptilian. Please do a stream about taking down reptilian ships and opening the macabre. That's how I found you. Yeah, that that was a very significant healing. But yeah, we'll talk about that another time. And also, in regard to that, for the macabre, we understand that more from the Hebrew perspective of where they would talk about this vehicle of light. And this ties in to all the different mystic traditions. You best believe. I got a taste of the macabre when I was going very, 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 very deep with the Bufo toad medicine, 5-MeO DMT. And that was the first time that I took such a significant amount of Bufo at the time. Usually for most people, we're talking about 100 milligrams. Most people around that range for a super blast off, right? Around that range. This, and usually that's, for most people, that's like 3 good pulls or a very long inhalation of the medicine and holding it very long, right? No, spirit kept on telling me, take more, take more, take more, take more. And there was a moment where there was this activation and I could see the macabre spinning around my body, my physical body. It was light blue in color, a whitish bluish color. And I seen, it's like the Star of David. I seen the top triangle, bottom triangle, and it was spinning super, super fast. And that's when this energy shot up my spine so quickly and went through the top of my head. That was a very powerful, powerful experience. And that involved one of my friends who had a stroke, and he actually came to that healing in a wheelchair, and about 5 minutes was able to get out of his wheelchair and almost jog with this one leg that was still around this tree. It was amazing. We all witnessed a miracle that day. But the macabre is the light vehicle, and anybody that's into galactic history or have studied any subject upon UFOlogy or anything of that nature, they speak upon the star elders. They speak upon sentient beings who had the capacity to travel the stars, to travel to different star systems, different planets. And if you read up on, this, you hear about this all the time now, with the specials, Ancient Aliens and all that. So this is not any new news for a lot of people if they've seen those type of programs or shows, right? But, there's different ancient cultures, indigenous cultures that talked about being star travelers, from the Hopi to the Zulus of South Africa to the Dogons of Mali. I mean, the list goes on. And they have a different narrative on how their origins exist. They have a narrative that they lived in far out places, other places in the stars before they physically came here to this planet. You know, for a lot of people that could be far-fetched. For a lot of people, they like, I can't believe that. That sounds too much Star Trek, too much sci-fi for me. But I think as time presents itself, and that's why we need more courageous, brave archaeologists that aren't going to be controlled by the Smithsonian Institute. When we have more courageous scholars that come forward and are not just played out for a paycheck and see these ancient things that are unearthed, then it brings a whole different story of history to the forefront. You know, I believe there's tremendous ancient technology of the past that we won't see the light of day, the average person. You know, they might, the so-called elite might see these things all the time. The so-called elite might see these things buried in the Vatican basement. You know, for those that don't know, Baba Kalindi, I remember of his passing, and we was at his go away memorial, you know, and there was an elder that talked to us and said that Baba Kalindi spent the night in the Vatican basement. Kalindi had the ability or a city to be able to cloak himself physically and to be able to go into places unnoticed. You know, I wish that I knew that at the time. I would have asked Kalindi, hey man, what did you see in that Vatican basement? You know? So even when we look at UFOologists and they say, well, these two particular beings travel in these type of ships, right? Well, there also are beings that are more advanced that don't need the aid of a physical ship. They take their actual physical vessel and change it into a form of light as a light vehicle to travel from one place to the next. You know, they talk about the macabre and from the Hebrew perspective, but also in Tibet, they talked about a lot about the rainbow body phenomena, where these lamas and rinpoches would turn their body completely into light at the time of their so-called death and take their body with them. You know, so far, I believe it's over 200,000 documented cases so far in Tibet that eyewitnesses seen these high masters turn into their body of light. And usually, most of the time, there's a levitation phenomena that goes with it. So they're in the cross-leg lotus position, and usually you see them levitate so many inches or feet off the ground. And there's a spinning that happens. The body starts to spin so fast that it goes into a place of light. And that's why, yeah, okay. So let me continue with the comments here. Okay. Yeah, someone Alpha says John Coltrane's wife. Yes. Brilliant pianist. That's right. I don't know if you saw, but there's a musician's brain that died and the brain is still making music. Wow. Interesting. Wouldn't surprise me. Different technology things these people are dealing with. Thank you for sharing. Another person says, thank you, Dooley, blessings. How can connect with you for a session? Well, if you want to connect me, you can reach me on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, but I'm more on Facebook. And you can leave me a message in the inbox there. And it's Brother Dooley, or BRO space Dooley, DULI. And you could leave a message there. Usually how it goes about with me doing sessions with people is, First is on the phone, just to check in what you're looking for, and and see what your needs and all those things. And taking it from there, sometimes people fly me out to their state or wherever they're at. And I just ask for lodging and meals for that. Usually it's a 3-day experience, especially if you're dealing with the snake venom, because the snake venom is a 3-day process. But if there's other services that you want me to do, the combo or the psychic surgery or what have you, we could talk about that. And yeah, that's that. And or sometimes people visit me in my hometown. I'm in the Boston area, Boston, Mass. So if sometimes people come to me and we'll do the work too. But yeah, you could reach me out at Bro Dooley, Duli, on Facebook, and that'll be kind of the best way to kind of reach me. Yeah. Also, if you don't have Facebook, you could try to email me. I don't usually check my emails that much, but if you do want to email me, it's lovemother33@gmail.com. Okay. So again, that's lovemother lovemother33@gmail.com. All right. Okay. Someone else says here, you talked about the flying men in Haiti when you initiated me in Reiki. Oh yeah, that's my brother there. Okay. Yep. That was a good book. Faces in the Smoke was the name of the book. Someone says Supercell. Yeah, that was a good show. I seen that. With great powers, comes great responsibility. Someone says, when I did ayahuasca, there was a rainbow pentagram that was getting rid of parasites within my body. That's dope. Very, very deep. Good to see you again, teacher. Will Ahmad, peace. Thank you. Will Just Foul is a troll and is just foul. Having a moderator can get rid of trolls during a live. I don't know. Okay. All right. Kalindi Alpha says Kalindi was ahead of his time, and the things he spoke about in 2018 were downloaded into my trips. Yeah, Baba Kalindi, if you didn't know or never heard of this elder who's an ancestor now, great man. He was a very special person for our time. And he has the Tamarian Institute where still people could still take classes out of Detroit. His son Ramasu is one of the teachers spearheading with the rest of the family there, Mudu and everyone else, Brett Scott, all the brothers and sisters that are involved in. They're talking about the origins of martial arts out of Africa and other places of indigenous melanated people. And what's so interesting, Kalindi would do one particular move that was actually copied in the Doctor Strange movie, because it was someone that was actually working for Disney and sat down with Kalindi and was interviewing him and took all this material that he was talking about and put parts of it in the Doctor Strange. But the way they open up the portal is one of the main moves that they use from the Tamarian Institute. And this is a movement that I learned from Ramasu, Kalindi's son, that mimics the movements of the stars, and is also connected with the constellation Sirius, the Sirius star constellation. Kalindi would talk about the ancient wars. He talked a lot about galactic history. talked about when Black folk or melanated folk went to war with the reptilians at one point, how we were losing the war at that time, and that we had to flee. And it came to Mars and then eventually came to this planet. Um, Kalindi was a very, 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 very brilliant, powerful man. And he's still around. Occasionally he'll take me to the spirit dojo or the astro dojo, where it feels like I'm in a martial art class with him at the time. So he still shows up, and he talked about the different realms of provided for artists. If you're an artist, to come and sit with famous painters to inspire you and bring back new inspired ideas for your artwork. He talked about the realms of musicians, where you go to these realms and sit down with Bach, Beethoven, John Coltrane, Alice Coltrane, all these people, Thelonious Monk, Tupac, Biggie, what have you, and be able to bring back new inspired forms of approaching your music. So he talked about the different realms. He talked about the ability to use the transdimensional crystals, the Yingmenzu crystals, these high forms of technology crystals, which you can use as roadmaps throughout the multiverse, as ways to bring you back to these places consciously when you're with the sacrament, when you're with the ethogenic medicine. Kalindi was amazing. And when I met Kalindi for the first time, I was at UMass Amherst speaking about urban shamanism, and he liked my talk. And I was very proud to get his approval, from such a great elder. And ever since that time, he would always invite me as a speaker at the Detroit Psychedelic Conference that he would have every 2 years. And it would be a time for different people around the world with great ideas, new discoveries, scientific discoveries, spiritual discoveries, all kinds of things that would come together and share ideas inspired by each other's work and all these different things. So Kalindi was one of those very special beings that came at a very important time. He talked about the inner technology, all these things. Baba Kalindi. And he was the one that talked about the high dose, Terrence McKenna. For a lot of people in a lot of psychonauts in the psychedelic community would reference people of the 60s like Terrence McKenna or Timothy Leary or some of these others. And Baba Kalindi, for Terrence McKenna, he would say the heroic dose was 5 grams of dried psilocybin mushrooms, where Kalindi came and pushed the envelope, where he was saying, hey, well, we're talking about 25 grams and up, which is a whole different experience and a whole different ballgame. So Kalindi was very interesting. He talked also about the secret societies within Africa, the connection with the leopard clan and the shapeshifters within these traditions, and also the science of sound weapons, because Kalindi was a warrior. So he's talking about the ancient technology in Africa, where we would know certain frequencies from the drums or certain other musical instruments that have control over the elements. Kind of like the Avatar in The Last Airbender, where a certain frequency would start a tidal wave or a tornado or what have you. So Kalindi was very, very interesting, way ahead of his time, not really embraced in the heyday of early Black metaphysical science at that time, even going to the melanated conferences in Brooklyn, New York, and stuff, and a lot of the elders who were brilliant in their own right, historians and different ones, but really did not know where Kalindi was coming from at that time. They weren't ready. Um, coming from the crack era, coming from the heroin era, seeing how the CIA brought in real drugs into our community to disable our community when we were coming together and celebrating Black Power, Afrocentric, bringing in our whole way of our own awakening. Even one of my aunts was a Black Panther at that time in the 60s and stuff. So seeing that and seeing how that affected our communities, it wasn't a coincidence that a lot of our Black elders or, melanated elders would say, well, we don't need any so-called drug in our community. And it was just a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of miseducation, the propaganda machine, not knowing that these sacraments aren't drugs. These, as Kalindi would say, these things are organic technology. And if anything, these things would get people off the real drugs. But he was coming out at a time where people weren't even caught up to where he was going yet. And also him making statements like saying Kemet, or ancient Egypt. He said that was kind of like the downfall of Black folk at that time compared to what we were doing prior, before even ancient Kemet, going into the epochs and the legacies of ancient Atlantis and Lemuria and all these different things, all these, like I said, all these buried civilizations that we aren't even aware of. So there was a lot of that. And that kind of brings me into also, I was going to end, but this is very important. I just leave out with this. No, I made a post about this on Facebook, and I was saying no shade to our brothers and sisters in the jungles of South America and different places, but there is something to do with ancestral healing. There's something to it. Not to say that a so-called Afro-American or Moorish person coming down to the jungles of South America can't receive healing. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that we need more Black healers to step up. And because we hold our own magic as well. And you can't downplay yourself just because you feel that you, quote unquote, have not had traditional training. Okay. I sat many years in ceremony learning different things from many different medicine men and women. And that is important because that's like hands-on experience. You can learn a lot of things in those situations, the good things and bad things, things that work, things that don't work, how things get out of control, how you bring it back in, all kinds of stuff. But also don't forget your innate gifts within your own ancestral bloodline, and also the work that your spirit has done over lifetimes, your different reincarnations. And when you start to really trust that process and listen, really listen, not listen from a place of ego and pride, but listen from a place of true discipline, then you will start to be familiar with your teachers on the other side, and taught certain things. I wasn't really a singer. I mean, I don't still consider myself a singer. But when I'm with the medicine and it's a certain frequency, these songs come out effortlessly. And the different tonations, the different rhythms, it's beautiful. There's times where I just sit back, the human side of me, the dooley side of me sits back sometimes and says, wow, that was so beautiful what just came out of me. It felt like an old grandma giving someone a beautiful hug. You know what I mean? And So we can't forget our gifts. There's certain things from an ancestral level where we have a collective experience, and a melanated Black healer being able to relate in certain aspects to the transatlantic slave trade, for instance, to other things, have certain tools just because of the blood to be able to pull out certain things out of a person. I'll give you an example. There was, I'll give you two examples, actually. There was a brother from DR, from Dominican Republic, that came to sat with me once, right? And we was doing the sacrament Yopo. Yopo is 5-MeO-DMT as well, just like the Bufo, but it's in powdered form from this particular seed. It's blown in the nose similar to rapé, or the sacred tobacco that's blown in the nose. It's blown in the nose similar like that, like with a tepe, all right, or a long little pipe into the nose. In this man's session, there was a point where they wanted me to do a whistle song for him. So I go along with what's being told for me to do. At the end of the session, he thanked me so much because he says, Dooley, first of all, you don't know how much that helped me with some ancestral things that I was going through. And I said, is that right? He says, yeah. He says, the particular place where I grew up in DR, there's this whole whistling tradition where each person in the family has their own whistle on how we greet each other. And this whole thing, he was telling me about this whole whistling thing from his family. So again, listening to what's needed in the session and trusting that process. It was a brother that I sat with from Ghana. And again, this was a client who was actually in the NFL, professional football player. And big brother, strong brother, there was a point in his healing where I seen him enslaved. And he was one of those quote unquote rebellious slaves that wasn't having it. And he didn't even make it over here. He was thrown off the ship. And the last thing I seen is him sinking in the water, in the ocean. And at this point, the way they had me working with these shells from Africa is this rattle thing that I used, but it was a particular thing that me and him could relate to because we have a shared blood. Now, I'm not saying again that my brothers and sisters from South America or some other type of people somewhere else couldn't be able to relate and help him, but there's something that sitting amongst each other that we have through the blood that we could be able to bring forth to the surface when we talk about ancestral medicine. Now, don't get me wrong. I've seen other different incarnations or reincarnations of myself. So yeah, I've seen reincarnations where I was born in South America. I remember one time sitting with the sister, seeing myself, same personality, everything. One of them tribes, I forget the name of the tribe, but it looks like somebody put a bowl over on their head and they just cut around them. I forget the name, but I had the same personality, everything, just different, just a different race or a different sense, skin suit at that time. You know, I've seen other lifetimes, other different races I was and stuff. So you can pull, if you're a sensitive person, you can pull from all these experiences into this one life if you want to as well, which could be unique medicine for different people you're working with. Okay, let me finish in reading these comments here. Someone says, Shaman Dooley has come to me twice. once in Arizona, and once in Wisconsin. And Shaman Dooley is authentic, genuine, and very knowledgeable. He carries the wisdom, song, healing, and medicine. That's Sister Sunfire there. Peace, Sunfire. Good to see you. Kalindi was always, somebody also say, Alpha HQ says, Kalindi was already talking about AI and the Plantier crystal. And now you have weapon companies called Plantier doing Pentagon contracting for the Department of Defense. He was spot on. That's what's up. What's Kalindi's first name and how do you spell it? Kalindi, Kilindi, and last name Iyyi. You know, you'll see a lot of different interviews of him on YouTube, and Blog Talk Radio too. That's another one. If you go to Blog Talk Radio, you could see a lot of old videos of him on there, you know, and he drops a lot of jewels, very deep. Like the person that was commenting, he talked a lot about AI and simulations and all kinds of stuff. Very, very knowledgeable elder, like I said before, and all of us were very much in shock on his passing, you know. So I felt like he still had so much to share with the world. And lastly, for those on the shaman path, especially the men, and when we're talking about, again, shadow work and different things of that nature, it's important, and that's why even Kalindi said when people would sit with the mushrooms, he would have the sisters sit with each other and the men sit with each other, because Kalindi would also talk about that natural sexual arousal, especially at the lower dosages of mushrooms, you know. So when we look at things like connecting with what some people would call the central nervous system and it being activated by these energies, sometimes these energies can translate as a form of ecstasy and bliss as well, or even having a level of sexual stimulation through a level of releasing and opening. And that comes along the lines of those who are holding space for people, of sitting with the medicine with people, to have a level of maturity, you know, and because there could be a crossing of lines and that could bring forth a lot of damage, you know, with the people, especially if you're a man working with women and stuff like that. A big majority of women I come across, about 90% of them have come across in some shape or form of sexual molestation, sexual violation. And in a lot of these situations, they're looking for men that they can trust, not prey upon. Okay, and that's important. I remember it was one woman I sat with, and she got violated by her father. She got violated by her uncle and other men, figures in her family. And this woman told me straight out before we even started that she has a problem with men. Long story short, she says, Dooley, I would not have been able to do this depth of healing with another woman. You know, you had to be the trigger. Even though I have nothing personal against you, Dooley, I had to work with someone in a male vessel for this anger to really come to the surface and for me to really look at this, you know? There was moments in my life where I felt like there were interests from women that might have liked me, and sometimes that can happen, especially if you're helping someone. It could be this in this curiosity or this attraction because this person made me feel good or helped me get through a tough time. But I had to look at these things. And yeah, these times at these moments in my life, I now look back and say that might have been not the best situation of me engaging or dating, because it's like someone going to the doctors and there you have your physician or whatever. Now you're dating your doctor, and that might or your therapist or whatever, that might be too close for comfort you know and I noticed how things there was a lot of things I had to learn for them situations. So it's very important, especially for the men, to be able to have their balance within their sexual energy. That's very important, my brothers. Very important. And but also at the same time, when you're able to find your mate, when you're able to really find someone that you can really have that connection with, it's a blessing. It's a blessing because you're able to work out a lot of those things with your partner. You know, not only the shadow work, but also because sexual demons are real. The spirit of lust is real. You know, and then we live in a world where everything is over sexualized. You know, um, people don't even know how to approach sexuality from a mature place. You know, everything is highly sexualized, and it's in this part of the world, it seems like it's the extremes. So we come from this place historically where you have one part where looking at sexual energy or sexuality as something bad, right? And the ushering in of the patriarch and saying, oh, the sins of the flesh and all these other things. And then everything is repression, right? Suppression and all this. But behind closed doors, they're doing all this crazy stuff. Um, and then on the flip side, from this so-called pious thing, now you have the over sexualization. And so, like Buddha is the middle way, the middle path. So when we start to talk about engaging and having a partner that you can explore each other, even on a sexual level, and start to introduce the ethogenic medicines, oh, it's a game changer. Oh, it's so powerful, very, very powerful. And I feel very lucky, feel very honorable that I'm with a woman right now that we feel safe enough to explore each other and on that level. And I've been exploring sitting with the microdose, with the bufo, and exploring my woman in different ways and seeing how even certain spirit guides coming through my body telling me how to go down on my woman in another way. Um, Certain ways, even when I'm in her, my phallus is in her, and certain energies coming through. And again, that's the place of discernment. So you all, again, even in those situations, knowing when you're being guided. And I tell you, even my lady would say, like, wow, this has shifted so many things for her. Toxic relationships prior, certain negative imprints that were in her womb, all kinds of things to be able to have shift things with her physically and also have a trickle down effect even into her direct bloodline in her family. And also different levels of pleasure, you know. Very, 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 very interesting. But hold on, let me somebody also made a comment. Okay. All right. Okay, yeah, somebody put the name Kalindi. Yee. Okay. So I gotta get going, y'all. I gotta it looks like I've been on here 2 hours and 35 minutes. I have to get ready for my client. But I do hope y'all enjoyed the share. I hope that y'all got something from it that that might resonate with you. And yeah, yeah. So again, thank y'all for listening. I appreciate y'all. And you take it easy and keep on evolving and doing your thing, y'all. Okay. Hey, how do you cut this off now? Let me see here. Okay. How you do this damn thing? Okay. Okay. Let's see here.